and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Alt? Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Dr. Pike?
Here.
Mrs. Kaufman? Here. Mrs. Love? Here. Mr. Miller? Mr. Malakowski?
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mr. Benz?
Here. 6 present. Thank you. 7 present.
Let the record show that Mr. Alt and Mrs. Rhodes both telephoned today, and they are not going to be able to attend. Each has a family bereavement situation.
We're going to have a little positive news before we start citizens' comments.
Before we go into citizens' comments, on April 6th, the latest edition of the Pittsburgh Business Times came out. We were able to get an advanced copy of it. I will have a detailed report of what this is all about at our voting meeting. But I just wanted to give you a preview of some of the things that we found out. This is the Pittsburgh Business Times Western Pennsylvania Guide to Schools 2012. You may remember last year we did pretty well in their rankings. As a matter of fact, as a district last year, we were 41st regionally out of 104 districts in the region. This year we're 33rd. We were very excited about that. Regionally, last year our 4th graders ranked out of 306 school buildings, our 4th graders ranked 120th. This year, a big jump, 48th. So we're very proud of them for that. In 2000, that's in the region. In 2011, our overall state ranking out of 497 schools ranked was 156. This year, out of the same 497 schools, we jumped to 134. In terms of the overachiever rankings, and the overachiever rankings takes into consideration the amount of economically disadvantaged students, the number of economically disadvantaged students in our population. Last year, you might remember, in the region, we were number 4th as an overachieving school district. This year, we're number 3rd, number 3. And in the state last year, we were the 18th most overachieving district in the state out of 497 districts. This year, we are the 11th most overachieving. So, again, I'll have a more detailed report for you next week, but I just wanted to kind of get out there and give you a little preview of what that's about. We're exceptionally proud of our educational team. We're exceptionally proud of our kids and our community. So I wanted to give you that little piece of good news before citizen comments.
Citizens' comments.
There are no comment cards this evening.
Minutes.
At the voting meeting, you will be asked to approve the minutes for March 1 and March 8th, as well as a special meeting for April 4th, 2012.
Finance.
You'll be asked to...
Question on the motion.
the-
Question. Is this the whole thing? These are the minutes from the April 4th meeting? It's the whole
Yes.
thing?
You'll be asked to approve the treasurer's report and the financial reports for both February and March.
Old business.
Under finance also, we have Jason Ragone, April Copus, and Dawn Smith, and they are from the Regional Industrial Development Corporation, and they're here to address you tonight about the former Sony site.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jason Ragone, the Executive Director of the Southmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation. And before we go into what we're here for tonight, first of all, I'd like to say congratulations for obviously the rankings. Obviously, the school board and the administration and the teachers in Southmoreland are doing a fantastic job to achieve the rankings that Mr. Molnar just presented. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Tonight we're here to talk to you about an opportunity that's available to us. Last year I was here talking with you about the payment in lieu of tax agreement for the former Sony Technology Center, We've been talking, and I know we had to discuss this the other day, that we need to get off of calling it the Sony Technology Center and really call it the RIDC Westmoreland site. Let's look about moving forward, not necessarily what was in the past. So I'm here to talk to you about the RIDC Westmoreland site and a program and an opportunity that's become available to us. But before we get into that, I thought that this was a good opportunity to bring in Don Smith, president of the RIDC. Probably reading some articles in the newspaper, you've seen this organization, the RIDC. I talked about them last year when I was here as well. They are our counterparts out of Pittsburgh, but they're bigger on a regional level. Put a name, a face with an organization. Don's going to give you a little bit of an update regarding the site development and finance and marketing. And then I'll come back up and I'll talk to you about this program that's become available to us. And we can go through a little presentation and then be available, obviously, for some questions. With that, Don?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to come out here to Westmoreland County. As Jason mentioned, RIDC, we're a private, not-for-profit economic development organization, not unlike WCIDC. But we do operate in the 11 counties of southwestern Pennsylvania. So we go as far east as Indiana, as far north as Lawrence, and down to Greene County as well. This is our first project in Westmoreland County, at least in my memory. I don't know, maybe the first one ever. In part, that reflects the great job that Jason and Larry before him do in doing these kinds of projects, so there was no need for us to come out and help out in this part of the region. But we're really excited to be here, and we think this is a tremendous opportunity, not just for RIDC, not for WCIDC, but really for the region. As you all are painfully aware, this was a tremendous job-producing site back when Sony was here, and actually employed people from 17 counties around the region. Our goal is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. We want to restore it to that kind of job-producing site. And we are really focused on trying to bring in manufacturing companies that will provide not only a large number of jobs, but also high-quality jobs. So we're really talking about trying to create those high-quality employment opportunities. It's a very exciting site because of the infrastructure that's there, the highway infrastructure, some of the water and sewer and other infrastructure that's there. It's also an extremely challenging site. And so the state came to us and asked us to take over management of the facility for them in partnership with Westmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation. And we were happy to do that. But just to give you a little sense of what we're up against, despite the great facility that is there, our business plan shows that we're going to lose money on this deal in our projections, at least until the 6th year of managing the facility, and that assumes that we actually are successful in recruiting more companies to come in and do that, and we're very confident that we will. But it is a big financial challenge. It is a 2.8 million square foot facility, and so even simple things like that cost $10 a square foot, that ends up being $28 million. So to give you a sense of our capital budget, I know you have challenges with your capital budget and a great physical plant here. Our plan for the 7 years is $65 million of capital investment into that facility. So that includes things like replacing the roof, the parking lots, bringing the mechanical, HVAC, and other systems up to standard so that we can attract the kinds of tenants and jobs that everybody wants to see. You may have read, hopefully you did, about Aquion Energy. This was a huge win out of the gate for us. This is a company that is taking about 300,000 square feet in the facility, and their plan is to have 500 jobs in that space over the next 3 years. And these are high-paying, energy-related manufacturing jobs. I can tell you we're also in late-stage negotiations with 2 other companies, one of which that would also create about 400 manufacturing jobs, and another one that's a smaller company that would only be about 50 jobs, but 50 good jobs in that facility as well. I think you're probably aware Westmoreland County Community College is putting their technical training facility there, which will be a tremendous benefit to the companies that come there in order to get their workforce trained. We feel good about the opportunities that are there, but we are also mindful of the amount of work that we have in front of us in order to make this happen. We really do appreciate your cooperation on the pilot agreement, and I can assure you we're going to honor that, and we're going to do our best to fill the facility, because every square foot that we fill is a square foot that is paying rent instead of us paying to operate the facility. And so we thank you for your cooperation on that. And tonight we're really here to talk to you about asking for your cooperation on pursuing a Keystone Opportunity Zone status for the plant. This has been reopened again on a state level. And to give you a sense of how important this is, the looming possibility of this was one of the reasons that Acquion chose this facility. In this particular case, we were competing against Arkansas, Louisiana, Michigan, and a fourth state that I can't recall right now, but it was 4 other states competing against this facility. And the possibility of this KOZ would really be a competitive advantage in helping us bring those jobs here. We have a company on site now that's a Japanese company. They're running the line that they have 24/7 right now, and they have excess demand. They're trying to convince Japan to relocate another line from Japan to the Sony facility, which would add another 50 jobs. They called yesterday and they said, hey, we heard about this KOZ discussion. You know, if we had that, we could convince, you know, this would really help us to convince Tokyo to move that piece of equipment here that would guarantee about a 15-year run of jobs, because that's how long the machinery lasts, and it's very expensive, and adds more jobs to the facility. So with that, I'll stop, and I'll let Jason or April talk a little bit more about the program, and then happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thanks, Don. April Copus here. April Copus is also here. April is the executive, and I apologize, I didn't introduce her before, but April Copus is the executive director for the Redevelopment Authority for the County of Westmoreland. She's also the KOZ coordinator for Westmoreland County. So we're going to go through this packet of information we're providing to you to give you an understanding of what it means to be in a KOZ site. And if you have any questions, obviously we're all here to answer those, but it was important to have April here as well, being the coordinator, having her background in the program itself. And I'll wait till everybody gets their packet before we start through this. Okay, so as you open up your packet, on the right-hand side is a presentation that's in green. It says Keystone Opportunity Expansion Zone, presentation to Southmoreland School District. As Dawn had alluded to, there is a state-based program called the Keystone Opportunity. In this case, it's the Keystone Opportunity Expansion Zone. Just in brief, this is one of what's considered one of the nation's boldest and most marketable marketing tool our state has to offer. It's unique because it helps communities with their underutilized and undeveloped sites get back into productive reuse. There are 12 regional zones throughout the state, and the number of acres in the zone in the program right now is about 46,000 acres statewide. And this program is administered through the Department of Community and Economic Development at the state. Now, none of this really means anything, but what really is important about the program is that why this program is so advantageous to have is that it is basically, and I'm just going to term it as a tax-free zone. So from a state and local level, the taxes are abated on site. State taxes, sales tax, corporate net income tax, as well as franchise tax. On the local level, business gross receipts tax and business occupancy taxes, business privilege taxes, and real estate taxes are abated. So that's what the program provides to companies locating into a KOZ site. But they have to also be eligible for those. There's eligibility requirements, job creation, capital investment, so on and so forth. So a company can locate into a designated KOZ site, but they also have to be eligible to receive the benefits of the program. Historically, this is a program that was started back in the 1999, was the first time.
The only time new sites are entered into the program is when legislation reopens. They allow so many sites to be entered into the program. And this is a highly sought-after program from an economic development standpoint statewide. Some of the highlights so far since its inception, the KOZ program has created about 35,000 jobs statewide, with 8,000 of those being in manufacturing. In southwestern Pennsylvania, in the KOZ sites, 10,000 jobs were created in southwestern Pennsylvania, and statewide about $3.7 billion was invested in capital improvements. So obviously the program has been very successful statewide, and that's why we're looking at it as a potential for the former RIDC site, or excuse me, former Sony site, now the RIDC Westmoreland site. Flip to the third page. In February of this year, legislation was reopened and approved again to allow more sites to come into the program. There's 4 sites allowed to enter into the program this year for applications to be submitted, and another 15 next year. There's 2 options. You can either have a 10-year option for a tax-free site or a 15-year option. As we talk through this, we're really looking at this as from a 10-year perspective. We don't want to go the full 15. We think 10 years is what would suit the site well enough, and that's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. Also, the legislation only allows a total for each zone to be 350 acres. And that's important also as we go through this discussion. So only per site, per zone, 350 acres. Now, if you flip over to the site plan that's been attached in your program or in your packet, what we looked at doing is, can we be creative with this? The entire RIDC Westmoreland site, if you included all of the property within the tax parcel, it's 350 acres. But some of that property is undevelopable. It's really not something that we foresee usable in the near future. So what we really looked at doing is only covering the building and some of the surrounding areas where new construction could take place. And that acreage comes to about 173 acres. So that left us another 178 acres or so to say, what else can we get into the zone that may make some sense? That provides Westmoreland County and East Huntington Township another marketing tool to attract businesses to this location. My organization, the Westmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation, has 4 industrial parks that surround the RIDC Westmoreland site. 2 of those sites are relatively full, and 2 sites are unoccupied at this point for the most part. As you see here, the Westmoreland Distribution Park North to the west of the RIDC Westmoreland site, we looked at placing the remaining acreage into the KOZ site, again, to add that extra element, an extra marketing tool to attract businesses into Westmoreland County and East Huntington Township. So all told, the KOZ site here in Westmoreland would be about 350 acres, maximizing our opportunity. If you flip to the next page, as Dawn had mentioned earlier, when we're talking about these big projects, the Aquilons of the world, they're not just local projects. They're looking nationally, sometimes even globally. And we need to be competitive on a national basis. Providing these tax-free zones is really an opportunity to attract those major projects. But not only is there competition on a national level, but also on a county-by-county basis. Our neighbors in all the other counties have a lot of acreage in the KOZ program. And I didn't list every county, but we just listed really the 2 closest neighbors, Washington County and Fayette County. Fayette County has nearly a little under 1,500 acres in the KOZ program. Some of their parks have been filled up because of this program. Washington County has what they call the Alta Vista Park, which is located about 5 miles west of Menneson, just inside the Washington County border. Has the KOZ program, has the benefits available to it to market to companies. And recently they've had a number of announcements of companies moving into those parks. So I represent Westmoreland County. Dawn represents the region. I represent Westmoreland County, and maybe I'm a little bit more provincial that I want Westmoreland County to gain all these projects. But there is obviously an element of competition on a national level, but also on a local level as well. So on the next page, we're going to talk about, and be straightforward, what are we giving up versus what are we gaining? So on the column on the left, I'm going to talk about what we're giving up. At the RIDC Westmoreland site, we talked about in the KOZ program, you give up local business taxes, occupancy taxes, business privilege taxes, so on and so forth. East Huntington Township and Southmoreland School District don't have any of those taxes. They've never enacted them. So you're not giving up any of those. You have nothing to give up from that standpoint. We talked about property taxes. The site is tax exempt, but we came down last year to make sure that Southmoreland, East Huntington, Westmoreland County would receive something based on occupancy, and that's why we wanted to have the pilot in place. That stays in place. That doesn't change.
Just not to cut you off, but we have 4 brand-new board members that weren't here last year.
Okay.
Can you update them on what
Sure.
was about last year?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's take a step back. The pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes, and I apologize for that. I should have asked that question, but the payment in lieu of tax agreement, the RIDC Westmoreland site is owned by the Commonwealth, and because of that, it's tax exempt. Our organization, and working with Dawn's organization, realized that we wanted to make sure that the taxing bodies received something for the site. So based on the appraised value, we went out and spent $15,000 on an appraisal to make sure we knew what the value of the building was, and based the pilot agreement, what was to be paid, based on that appraisal. And it's based on occupancy. Every time space is occupied on a square footage basis, a pilot or payment is made through the lease payment back to the taxing bodies. So that's what the pilot agreement is. It has been executed by the township, it's been executed by the county, by the school district, by the RIDC, by the IDC, the Westmoreland County IDC, and it's at the state right now. And I touched base with my contact where the pilot's in place, and it's in the office of the budget right now, or office of general counsel, looking to get signed at this point. So we're hoping to have that finalized and back. But as far as we're concerned, it's executed, and we're going to make a payment. We're committed to making a payment through that payment in lieu of tax agreement. Is there any? Let me stop there. Is there any questions regarding the pilot agreement? The
So much a square foot.
It's 13 cents a square foot, which is being paid, and again, that was based off the appraisal that was finalized last year. And then in the 10th year and 11th year, there's a bump to 20 cents a square foot.
Do you think that'll be accomplished before we have to have our resolution?
Well, Dave, I hope so. I mean, that's why we have the state to get pushed as quickly as possible. It's really not in my control, but whether they sign it or not, again, we are committed to making sure that payment is made to the taxing bodies. So as far as I'm concerned, it's an executed document. We're going to make the payment. Okay, so going back to the presentation, so the pilot's in place. So from a real estate standpoint, there's nothing to give up because we have the pilot in place, and that's going to move forward. There's no change there. So from the building standpoint, enacting a KOZ doesn't affect any of the taxing bodies any differently. There's no difference. It's only thing it does is it adds that extra element, that extra marketing or marketing tool to our tool bag to track those manufacturing companies that are going to create those jobs. From the Distribution Park North site, what would be given up? Well, right now, the site, because there are no buildings in it, and because it's owned by a nonprofit county agency, it's exempt right now. If there was no KZ, if we sold a property, it would go back onto the tax rolls. But right now, the school board the taxing bodies are receiving nothing right now, $0 from it. And I would think that from a budgeting standpoint, that you're not basing it off of that. There's going to be another building built this year, and then there's one after that, and what our taxes are going to be based off that. So from a conservative standpoint, what we're asking you for is to forego the taxes associated with any new companies coming into that site in order to give us that marketing tool to attract those manufacturers that want to build brand new buildings instead of going into an existing facility. So what are you gaining? Well, number one, you're gaining a faster absorption of space, and that equals that the pilot revenue is generated faster. So that's a benefit. Benefit to us, it's a benefit to you, that as more space gets occupied through that pilot agreement, you get your payment that much quicker. It's a benefit because it helps go through that capital investment plan. As more companies move in, Dawn had stated, we have $65 million worth of capital investment that needs to be made into the site. So it also accelerates that business, or that capital investment plan. In addition to that, as we absorb space faster and sell land, that means our local community, the local workforce, gets, there's jobs available to those. And if those residents or that workforce that lives within the township or school district, obviously the wage taxes come back to the school district, as well as the local service tax that is in place, the $52 that is collected by the township and is shared with the school district. That is not exempt. That stays in place. In addition to that, again, obviously the attraction of new jobs, it provides job opportunities for our local workforce, and that's what we strive to do every day. And then also the growth of the manufacturing base creates a lot of spin-off opportunities for our local supply chain, for our local companies. In addition to that, if we put the distribution park north into the program in year 11, after we've attracted those businesses into those sites, all of those buildings, all of that investment goes onto the tax rolls, and all those taxes end up coming to the taxing bodies, so that's a good thing. And lastly, the other parks I talked about before, there is 2 that are in East Huntington Township, which obviously the taxes are split with Southmoreland, 1 in Hempfield Township. But the taxes that are generated in those parks, Technology Park 1, Westmoreland Distribution Park East and West, generate about $800,000 in taxes to the 3 taxing bodies. $600,000 of that comes back to the school district. So these development plans really have a benefit to the taxing bodies as a whole. It takes time to do that. This is giving us that extra tool. That $600,000 is not going away. It stays in place, and that continues to come in on an annual basis. So I guess in summary, we have a lot to gain versus what you'd be giving up. Really giving up, based on what you have right now, you're not giving up anything. What you're gaining is a whole lot of opportunities. And then from a procedural standpoint, just to walk you through that. The application, if we want to submit for the 10-year basis, has to be submitted. The application has to go into DCED, Department of Community and Economic Development, by June 1st of this year. And I apologize for coming down here. We hate to do things last minute and ask you to make, decisions quickly. But the legislation was just passed in February. We couldn't get down because all the information on the program wasn't out in March. This is the first meeting since then that the information from the program, we wanted to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row before we came down here and didn't have any gray areas. But we need to, if we're going to move forward, we need to move forward with this quickly. An ordinance needs to be passed by each taxing body. I can tell you the county's typical standpoint is they will go along with whatever the school district and the township, they consider it more of a local issue on these types of situations. So if the school district and the township approve it, then the county typically follows suit. That's typical, that's their policy. So we need to pass a resolution and an ordinance moving forward. I know we gave a draft of that ordinance to Mr. Petonic, as well as a draft to the county solicitor to start to be reviewed, to make sure that, starting to take a look at the language in case there were any questions, just to start that process as quickly as possible. If approved, the KOEZ or the KOZ program, the benefits for the companies would start in January of this year, and then it would sunset in 2022. There's a sunset date. It's done at this date, and then the KOZ program is over moving forward. So with that, I guess if there are any questions for myself or Dawn or for April, we'd be happy to answer anything.
Who will sign the lease with the new tenants? Is it Ritzy or is it PETA?
It's our IDC. So the terms of our agreement with the state is that we will have a master lease for the full facility, and then we will execute all the leases, and we do not need PETA approval on each individual one, which saves us a tremendous amount of time in terms of getting the documents processed.
Okay. And at the end of the 10-year KOZ for the existing site that we formerly called the Sony site, will it still be owned by PETA, or is Acrion purchasing it?
Acrion is not purchasing it and does not have a purchase option. RIDC, in partnership with WCIDC, does have a purchase option. So we have leased the facility for 30 years. So we have a 30-year lease to operate the facility, but we do have the option to purchase it.
So it would only be if RIDC or Westmoreland County Industrial Development sold it to another entity that was taxable, that we would start with an actual assessment process versus some other kind of payment in lieu.
In actuality, I mean, the payment in lieu of taxes agreement runs for 15 years, I believe.
I'm sorry for the.
So we have the 15-year agreement, but once that's done, RIDC, despite being a nonprofit, actually pays real estate taxes. We do that by choice because we're an economic development organization, and our goal is to help the municipalities in which we do our economic development. So each year we pay about $4 million currently in real estate taxes across those 11 counties and municipalities. So it would be taxable even if we purchased it.
Okay, if the, and I apologize, I thought of these questions after we met, but in the situation with your leases, are you just building the payment in lieu of taxes just right into the lease payment with the new prospective tenants?
It's for the new leases, so we
Yes.
inherited some leases and
For
we
the new
can't
ones.
change those, but for the new ones, we are basically doing what we call a gross industrial lease. So the base year taxes are included in the base rent that the company pays. So we're paying the taxes out of the rent that we receive.
So they just get a flat
They just get a
number?
flat number, and that's what they pay, and then the taxes are built into that essentially in our calculations.
Okay. So they have to pay you the flat calculation
Yes.
regardless of what makes it up?
Yes. Yeah. So really, what keeps us in line on that is the market. I mean, we can't charge more than they can get space for equivalent rates in other parts of the region. So, the big concern for us is really being able to deliver the space at a price that the market will absorb, given the amount of capital investment we need to do. And that's one of the reasons we're here asking for your help, as well as the Commonwealth's help in accomplishing that. Yes, ma'am.
I have several questions. First of all, you'll have to forgive my stupidity. Who are you people? Who are you? What's WCIEC? Who pays your salary? What are you?
Well, our organization is a slightly different than Dawn's from a makeup standpoint. We're a public, nonprofit corporation. My board of directors are the three Westmoreland County Commissioners. The Westmoreland County Commissioners back in 1983 created the Westmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation to provide economic development services throughout Westmoreland County. Our goal and mission there, primarily our focus was building an industrial park system throughout Westmoreland County. We currently have 16 industrial parks, some greenfield parks, some brownfield sites that we've redeveloped, like the former Menneson steel mill facility, Jeanette Glass, as well as greenfield parks we put roads and utilities in. But in essence, my bosses are the three county commissioners.
Who pays
They
you?
provide.
Who
They
pays you?
They provide us our operating budget.
They pay you.
Correct. They provide us a budget under the corporation. They give us a budget, financial budget, and we operate under those dollars. So yeah, it comes directly from the county.
Then how does he fit in?
So RIDC is a little bit different. We are not a public entity. We are a private not-for-profit. We've been around since 1955, and basically we don't receive any government operating support. So we pay ourselves through the rent that we generate on the facilities, and also through property sales when we've developed land and sold it. Our RIDC currently operates 9 parks, business parks and industrial parks and sites, and another half a dozen of independent building projects throughout the region. And we, in many of those cases, developed the land from raw land into RIDC Park in O'Hara Township, RIDC Thornhill up near Cranberry, RIDC Park West out near the airport, and then we have a number of brownfield sites throughout the Mon Valley where we've redone steel mill sites in principle, and have 1 or 2 sites in the city of Pittsburgh as well. And so that's how...
The state owns all of this land, though?
No.
No?
The state doesn't own any of it. The Sony site, former Sony site, is the only one that's state-owned, and that's really a legacy of the way the Volkswagen deal happened. And
It's the only one that is state-owned?
In our portfolio, yes.
in your portfolio?
Same thing with us.
Can you go back again and explain this to me? When you talk about give up and gain, you have Distribution Park North currently exempt. What do you mean by currently exempt?
Well, currently, the park has been developed, as Dawn had just stated, is taking raw land and developing that, putting the roads, utilities, so on and so forth, into the site itself, okay? And then you have parcels for sale that you are marketing to manufacturers to come in and build new buildings. Currently, at that park, we haven't sold any sites, any of the property, so it's just land right now. Because our organization is a public nonprofit corporation, working as an arm for the county itself. So, in essence, we're quasi-governmental. All right, we submitted for tax exemption. The only thing that's there right now is, again, just raw land. Typically, in our process, we would sell the land, much like Dawn's would sell the land, and as a building gets built on that land, it's not owned by us anymore. We don't build the buildings. A private developer would come in and build the building, and it would go onto the tax rolls at that point. But currently, right now, there are no buildings in it, so there are no taxes being generated because we're a quasi-governmental agency. We're considered tax exempt.
So that 13-cent thing that we signed, was that for this one?
No,
Distribution?
that's for the former Sony building,
Who owns that?
the state. So you have two different parcels here altogether. You have the parcel where the building's located, and that's owned by the state. You have the raw land, the Distribution Park North, which is owned by my organization, again, quasi-governmental agency working for the county. So two different parcels. There's two different parcels, two different ownerships.
It says here that their taxes will come online in year 11, so 11 years down the road, they'll start paying taxes.
That's correct. So if the taxing bodies go ahead and approve the KOZ program for, let's say just for the distribution, but that's really for the Distribution Park North site. So we attract companies into the park itself. They build their buildings. In year 11, because they're privately owned buildings even at that point, their taxes come online. They're tax exempt through the program till that point, and then in year 11, the program sunsets. There is no more KOZ program for that site, and they're paying their taxes. They're no longer exempt. The companies,
Can they leave?
well, my goal is for them not to leave.
Can they leave?
Can they leave? Sure.
Okay, the
They
reason
could go,
I'm asking.
go ahead.
The reason I'm asking this is you can hardly pick up the newspaper and you read about all the stimulus money that has been thrown around. And according to the latest article about your project here, we've already put $150-some million into that plant, which generates nothing practically. You put in another $65 million. And there was a comment there from Nate Benefield from the Commonwealth Foundation. He said, states should create a new economic development policy that does not rely on subsidies. It's not creating economic growth, it's shifting resources from one place to another. Incentives can attract companies, but they transfer the tax burden onto everyone else. And, I see it all the time, what do you call them, editorials and things like that, and they're saying, how many times are we going to do this?
Okay.
Well, just
yeah.
on the $65 million figure, by the way, that's actually money we're going to invest in the site, not taxpayer money. So that $65 million is
Oh, that's good, okay.
is what we have to put into the
Good.
site to put, new roof, new heat and ventilation, and actually a big part of that is breaking up a facility that was a one-company facility into a multi-company facility. Requires us building demising walls, fire corridors, other kinds of things that'll change the facility. So that money is money we're going to invest in the facility over the next 7 years.
Okay, now it says here you have a Distribution Park North, a Distribution Park East, and a Distribution Park West.
Correct.
I don't see it marked. Is it just like that one big red line there?
First of all, maybe it's a little bit easier if everybody has that question, if I approach and I can point things out rather than it. But let me just take a step back. I don't know the article that you're referring to, but some of the things that
The Allegheny County
Okay,
is
so
happy that they're leaving.
a lot of the taxes or a lot of the funding that went into that site or the site benefited from is a couple of things you have to also take into consideration is that if funding was provided in the past, like for Volkswagen, that they always taken all this money went into it, and that's true. Part of that was building 119 from New Stanton, putting it into a 4-lane divided highway. I don't know about you, but I think that that's an asset to the community, whether Volkswagen's still here or not. And that was a large part of back when Volkswagen was here. That's been an asset not only to the site, but to Westmoreland County and the region as a whole. In addition to that, making investments in infrastructure, and that's what we always like to see, is investment in infrastructure, is there for, not only for whoever, who lives here now, what businesses are here now, but also what businesses may be coming down the road, who lives here down the road. Infrastructure stays in place. We can all take advantage of it. So, again, going back and using the analogy of 119, that's been a benefit to Westmoreland County, to East Huntington Township, to the region as a whole. So,
One other point I'll make is, with the Sony site, given the rent that Sony paid to the Commonwealth has now made up everything they put into that facility except for $13 million. And by the time our lease is done, and if we purchase the building, the taxpayers of the Commonwealth will receive that money as well. So the Commonwealth will actually be paid back for the money that they put into the facility over the course of our agreement.
You understand the big question.
Absolutely.
Do we have 10 years and then kiss it goodbye? This has happened, this will be the third time. What's once burned, shame on you, twice burned, shame on me. What's 3 times,
Well, and one of the key distinctions now is we're not really targeting one company. So in that 2.8 million square feet, we're actually looking at on the order of 10 to 15 companies occupying that plant. So that even if one of them does decide to leave, we still have the other companies there. So in the past, we had Volkswagen, which was a one-horse show, and we had Sony, and we had 20 good years of Sony, as much as 3,500 jobs, so it was actually a pretty good investment, but it did leave. But now, using it as a multi-tenant facility, we hope that we'll be able to buffer that so that we'll have new companies moving in if any companies do move out.
What are you asking us to do?
One of the things I think Dr. Fike is questioning, we understand there's a pilot for the existing building.
Yes.
Distribution Park North has the 10-year tax abatement and then a sunset. I know I asked you the same question. Maybe you could go into the same explanation you gave me about how that Distribution Park North that's currently undeveloped will work, and the companies that may or may not come and go. We had that conversation when you met with us the other day.
Sure. Well, okay, so a company comes in and they build the building in the park. They're attracted there because it's a tax-free zone. So they're not paying tax. And I'm talking I want to make sure that we're very honest with you. They come into the zone and they're not paying any taxes. They build this new building. Okay, so at the end of 10 years, say they do go. Say they go bankrupt. You just don't know. There's nothing guaranteed. I mean, companies go on hard times, or maybe they make a decision that it's better for a lot of reasons to be located in South Carolina because labor costs are cheaper down there. Okay, so they want to make money. That's what they do. But the one nice thing is that the building's still there. It still has to pay taxes. They could file if it's vacant that it's at a lesser rate because it's a vacant building, but it's still a building paying taxes at that point. And in addition to that, it gives us something to market, to attract back into the county. You still have that asset there to market. So they make that capital investment to stay there, or they make that capital investment, the taxes are generated after year 10, whether they're there or not. In addition to that, most businesses are not going to build a 250,000 square foot building, which is going to cost in the neighborhood of around $20 million, and just walk out the next day. They have a vested interest in that location because they have this cost to sell.
Depends
Obviously,
who
this
paid
investment.
for it. Depends on who paid for it.
Well, I'm not paying for their building, and I don't think Dawn's going to pay for the
No,
building.
but taxpayers could pay for it, and then they don't care.
Well,
No, I'm not being difficult, because I really respect what you're doing. And
Okay.
I understand that this is not a simple matter to bring industry and jobs into the area. But I have friends whose lives were devastated by Volkswagen and Sony. They're running vending machines now because they have nothing. And they gave the best 20 years of their lives, the best 10 years, and they're very bitter. And many people are bitter about this.
And I can appreciate that, and I do understand that. I grew up, I actually went to York School District. I grew up in South Huntington Township. So I have some of the same people I know that work down at the site. I have friends that were down there. I can appreciate that. But that's why we're working so hard to do what we do. I think the plan is in place, I'll just say from the building's perspective, to diversify the employment base, the jobs that are, the businesses that are in there. That way we don't have to go through the same troubling times every 20 years or so. I think Dawn's point was well spoken, saying that when Sony was here, it It was hard when they left. They were a good community business. They did have a lot of jobs. There was a lot of benefit by having them here. But we are obviously having our challenges at this time. Working through this plan, diversifying our employment base is a good thing. It gives us stability. And it makes sure that when one company leaves, it doesn't pull the economy out from underneath the county. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And what we're looking for is, as Don had explained before, is that we're going to lose money probably for the first at least 6 years. We're willing to do that because we want to create job opportunities for Westmoreland County. We're willing, the county is stepping up and the region stepping up and saying that, hey, this site is our priority. We're going to go ahead and move forward even with the financial risk that's associated with it. And what we're looking for here now is a partner moving forward to accomplish our task. We're hoping that what you had stated won't happen again, and that's what we work every day to make sure. But there's no guarantees in life.
No, there are none, but right to work is a big issue. And
I
we're
agree.
going nowhere with it. I mean, I was down there when it was introduced, I testified. It's going nowhere, but I don't want to, I'm not trying to stop growth. I just don't want to make a serious mistake. I hope you can understand that.
Sure.
Jason, okay, the state owns RITC, Westmoreland.
Yes.
So we don't get any taxes from that, but because of your lease with the state, we'll get so much in payment in lieu of taxes.
Yes.
Now, the other parcel, the distribution park north, that's owned by the county, right?
Correct.
So we're not getting real estate taxes from that now.
Correct.
But if you bring a company in that will develop a property there, you'll sell them that land.
Yes.
But then the taxes are abated for 10 years,
That's correct.
right?
That's correct.
Now what if a company moves in, what if you don't sell it to them right away? What if they move in 5 years? Will they get a 10-year tax abatement?
No. No,
How does that work?
it is a defined term. So the program would start January 1st, 2013, and it sunsets December 31st, 2022. It's over with. So the sooner they move in, the more benefit they get by it.
Yeah.
So it's a defined time.
If they build a new building on the distribution north, will we get the 13 cents per square foot?
No, there is no pilot agreement for that property.
Okay. The new buildings, no, just what's existing,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Not a question, just a comment, but I've been on the board for over 8 years, and I have a hard time feeling sorry for you guys when you say you're gonna take a loss for 6 years, when we've taken a loss for more than 20 years because we've never got what we're supposed to get from Sony or Volkswagen in Texas. So I'm not saying what I think of your agreement, how I'm gonna vote. I'm just saying I have a hard time feeling sorry for you on that statement alone.
No, I appreciate that, and I can tell you that, my board, because we do have to pay our own bills, and look very hard at that, and trying to figure out, can we absorb those losses and not sink the company? And so that's really from our perspective, but that was our decision-making. What we're talking about tonight really is much more about getting those companies in, which of course helps us, because it helps pay rent on the facility and helps us break even. But it is a big benefit to it's a bigger benefit to the companies that move in, and that's really where the attractiveness comes from our standpoint, is helping to fill the facility as soon as possible.
In an ideal world, I wouldn't want any abatements. We give them constantly, or small ones out here at the mall when we brought in, helped develop out here, and brought sewage in. It's very helpful to hear you, however, because it is in bringing industry in, we're in competition with other states and other regions that are doing it, and I guess that's a part of it. And it is the benefit I see is that it brings employment. People then can buy houses, they can buy land, they can pay taxes then on their real estate, and one hopes for that, because that's our bread and butter here in terms of our tax base, and so I appreciate your coming in, and gosh, I'm only hoping we're with you, cheering for you that it goes. At least I am cheering that it goes well.
Well, we all hope we're paying that 13 cents on many, many square feet of occupied space.
This is just a point of clarification. You had gone over with this, Jason, but it may be hard for the board to see and understand. On the diagram of the old Sony site, you basically have the building and parking lot in a very small area of green space. And underneath that it says Ritzy, Westmoreland, 173.472 acres. So that actually is referring to the Sony site kind of shrunk down.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know what? Maybe I didn't explain that well enough, and I apologize for that. The red line where it says RIDC Westmoreland, there's a red line around the building. That signifies, or that illustrates a portion of the whole parcel that the state owns. Again, going back, we're trying to be as creative as possible to incorporate as much under this program. We said instead of incorporating the entire parcel, the 350 acres in which the state owns, let's just outline really what's needed potentially, the building and any development outside the building, as well as the other red line really outlines a majority of the Westmoreland Distribution Park North.
And then farther to the left is it almost looks like the state of Idaho, which is the Distribution Park North. And the label for it is actually outside of it, though. It's to the immediate right.
Correct, yes,
Which
yes.
is what makes this a little bit confusing to somebody who might
No,
be looking at it
that's
first
fine.
time. Now, here's the important question. In the area that wraps around Sony, that is green, on which the two labels appear,
Yes,
okay, that is still actually part of the old Sony site.
that's correct.
That is still part of the area of land covered by the pilot agreement that we discussed and enacted last fall.
Yes.
Correct.
Correct. So that area, which is not as desirable because it's obviously, I think, hillier.
There's a lot of elevation, there's a big
Lot of
power line
elevation.
that goes through. Yeah.
But in the, optimistic thought that if someone were to put a building there, that would be, based upon our existing agreement, still subject to the square footage, cents per square footage agreement that we have, because that's a new footprint.
Correct.
Yes, not exempted in the KOZ. Outside the red line.
It's
not
outside of the
exempted
KOZ, it's
by
not
the KOZ.
exempted,
Right.
it's still, but it's still
Subject to the
covered by
pilot.
the pilot.
Yes.
So that is one area, although it's not real likely, that maybe down the road, some building would go in there, that the district and the other taxing districts could receive the benefits of the pilot.
Correct. So only shown in red, outlined in red, are the areas that we're looking for the KOZ program.
So when we do the resolution, we're going to be calling the old Sony site Attachment A and the industrial, or the Distribution Park North Attachment B.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Regani had supplied me with a form resolution, and I've worked on it, and I sort of have a rough draft of it, which I'll hand out later, but I still have to talk with probably Mr. Ward and Mr. Gesselman about it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Any other questions for these gentlemen and lady?
I have a question for you, Jack. Last time we voted on this, they came in, said it, the vote was done in 5 minutes. Are we gonna have time to discuss this? Or are we gonna have to vote immediately?
Well, we're not voting tonight.
Well, I know that, but I mean, you know what I'm getting at. Last time it was bang, 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 it was
Yeah,
over, you know.
we are planning, we'd like to have it on the agenda for the voting meeting.
Yeah, but when will we discuss it?
We can discuss it right now.
Okay.
And in terms of some of the legal ramifications, Mr. Botonic will be discussing those in executive session because they would involve possible litigation as well.
I guess that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I thank everyone for their time. If you have any questions, you know what, I didn't pass out my card, but I know Mr. Molnar has my, and Mr. Salem have my contact information. If you want to contact me directly, or if you want to put it through Mr. Petonic, whomever, please feel free to do so. I know Dawn appreciates the opportunity to come in here and speak as well. Hopefully, we're all very successful. That's what we're striving to do, get the building filled up. And at that point, we have something really proud to be had at that point.
Yeah, I'm passing around some cards as well. I hope there's enough there. If not, I have a few more with me. If you guys have any concerns or questions as this goes on, please feel free to call me directly. We're happy to talk to you about what we're doing on site and what we've got in the pipeline. We really view this as a collaborative venture. And I would ask that Dr. Molnar, Mr. Salem, Mr. Petonic, if you feel it would be important or helpful for me to be here at the actual vote, just let me know, and I will come back to that as well.
We'll do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, several weeks ago, we did have a public budget forum. I've included a compilation of those comments in your packet. And I think Mr. Salem has a few things to discuss with respect to the forthcoming budget.
Well, we are in the heart of budget season, and traditionally, this is the beginning of budget season, but because the Act 1 timeline bumps everything up, as I said before, really begins in December. So now we're working on balancing our revenues and our expenditures. And over the last couple of weeks, Dr. Molnar and I have reviewed the budget. We've made reductions in the budget of over $250,000 so far. We still have a long ways to go, but we still have another couple of months until we have to send our budget to the state. So what I'm sitting around now is an updated version of our working budget.
Questions or comments from Mr. Salem?
What changes did you make?
We removed a number of items from the 640 category because one of the things we're planning to do is suspend a textbook adoption for next year. So a lot of what we took out was textbook supplies, things of that nature. Beginning that process, we're going to be collaborating with the principals to move a little bit further on that.
We have not made any reductions in staff, nor have we received any retirement notices either.
Sorry, Jack, did you say the 640 category, or did I hear wrong?
No, you heard correctly.
OE 640 object, OBJ, that's typically where your textbook adoption expenditures lie.
What were we to get? I mean, I know we're looking at science tonight. Is there something else we were going to get in addition to that you were thinking?
Well, if the board agrees to adopt a science series, that will come out of the current year's budget. Okay, so that money's already been budgeted for.
Okay.
All right, next year, according to our cycle, is practical and fine arts. And we would propose to postpone that adoption for at least a year. Those of you that have been around for a while know that when we've had tight budget years, we've often postponed adoptions for a year, and that generally results in a substantial savings.
I really don't expect you all to digest 29 pages of numbers right now, but please, take it home with you, review it, call me with questions. We'll see each other next week, ask questions at that time.
And we would also like to schedule a budget meeting that we dedicate just to budget discussion. And we're proposing that we do that a week from next Thursday, which would be 26th, April 26th. So if that's acceptable to everyone, we'll put that on the agenda for next week and schedule that meeting as well.
When do we go over the questions that the people ask at the,
I will have those responses ready for the 26th also.
we'll do that on the 26th?
Yes.
I'm wondering though, yeah, and if tonight isn't appropriate, I would be well, it was kind of on our mind here of hearing a few comments from people on the process or of the budget, that meeting. I would be interested in hearing what other people thought of that, if we have time for that tonight. Can I kick it off? Well, I would just, I thought it was an important meeting. I thought it was good to give the citizens, as a citizen as well, I was impressed that people came, parents came, and had comments about curriculum, about use of the buildings, foods, medication, taxes, and I don't know what I can't say that I got a sense from it, at least at our table, that somebody said, do this, and we were all going to do something, but it gave a good feeling for some of the concerns of that we're addressing here. So I don't know. I just thought it was a good process. I was glad for it. I didn't know what we were getting into for the meeting. So but I was curious. I was at the one table, so I was curious of what was happening at the other tables.
Other comments on that evening? Administrators have any comments too? You're here that evening. You guys?
I'll
Of
say
the
this,
94 there were
I sat at
94
the table
statements.
and I had several citizens there asking me some very pointed questions about the budget and the budgeting process. And I hope I was able to enlighten them to the process. Maybe they didn't like my answers, but I gave them truthful answers. And I thought it was a useful forum, yes.
Anybody else?
I looked at their 94 statements, or 94 entries into this document. It appeared to me that about 23 of them were related to the budget. The other 94 seemed to be statements and opinions that weren't budget related. For example, what is the number of graduates working in dead-end jobs? And I mean, I understand that's important. It's very, very, very important. I just was wondering how we would relate this information into a budget. I saw the vast majority of them were statements and opinions as opposed to budget-related questions, but maybe I'm missing them.
There were items on there that were not necessarily related to the budget.
Yeah.
As promised, our folks recorded comments and questions that were received. I typed those, so we tried to give an accurate picture of the citizen comments that we received that evening. We didn't, tried not to limit anyone's comments, so everyone was free to express their concerns, give their opinions. And we have those typed up, and we will get those onto the website as well.
How would you address something like food should be grown in the USA?
Dr. Fike, that's you're right.
It's tough for me to figure it out, Bill.
23 out of, let's say, a quarter of the questions actually pertain to the fiscal matters of the school district. And that's fine, because that's what's on people's mind. But what that forum did was it gave the people the ability to voice their concerns and give them an outlet that made them feel part of the process. And I think that was valuable in and of itself.
I do too, Bill, and I think maybe we should have some means by which we deal with those issues too. Do you see what I'm saying? You just don't ignore the other 70,
Right.
because they are issues of concern to the people who are in that room.
Right.
And even if they're not budget related, I think we need to somehow respond to the public in regard to their concerns.
Well, you know, like regarding where the food is grown or whether or not we have pink slime, you know, our ground beef, I think that question was brought up at the food service table, and our food service director was there to address those questions. And I'm not sure exactly the answers to those questions, but I do know that, you know, we buy our food from vendors that give us the best price, and we don't always have a say in where they procure that food. I'm not sure what the answer was regarding the pink slime, but those questions were asked and they were addressed.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, there was some, principal of the elementary down here were, yes, well, you answered some questions, and I think we tried to, as a board, not all of them, you know, where this one came from, what percentage of the people who are Amish are enrolled in special education. We may not have those figures exactly here, but obviously somebody's concerned here. But I thought there was a lot of good sort of folk wisdom here. To be a good critic, you have to offer solutions. Well, that's good. It's good for us here as a board. So I don't know. I thought it was good.
Any more comments or questions? Old business?
Old business, we will ask you to vote on policies 703, 821, and 210.1. We've discussed those on a number of occasions, so I'm not going to go into those in detail again unless someone has questions.
No questions? New business?
I've asked Dr. Scott and the principals and Mr. Castillo to join us this evening to talk a little bit about a proposed science curriculum adoption. So, Doctor, I'll turn the program over to you at this point.
We have been involved in a year-long process. It started back in August to review science materials, K-12, and in essence, trying to find the materials, textbook, online materials, web-based materials, interactive materials that supports our science curriculum. Dr. Molnar referred to the Pittsburgh Business Times. If you break out our science performance that we are measured on, we are drastically improving district-wide in science. Our fourth grade science, which fourth grade actually is the first time students are measured in science, and that is from their K through 4 experience. And in last year, our fourth graders were the highest performing group in Westmoreland County, which also makes them one of the highest performing groups in the Commonwealth. Science across the district is above the state average. If you track us back to 2005, we were below the state average. And again, that's part of us being an overachieving district. Our teachers truly do have a laser-like focus on what the standards are in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and they have to build curriculum around those standards. So again, what we have to do when we have the opportunity is to find those materials that our teachers know support the things that kids have to be able to know and do at the various grade levels from kindergarten through 12th grade. Mrs. Kaufman mentioned, which was a insightful point. For example, we kind of have a 7-year cycle, Mrs. Kaufman, to go through all the things. The last 4 years, we've been very fortunate to be able to adopt our cores, social studies, language arts reading altogether, math, and now science. So in theory, we'd be doing this every 7 years, but we haven't adopted science in 11 years, which means that it's not atypical, it's not unusual for us to have to go off cycle
in tough budget years. And I've been in the district 14 years, and unfortunately, there seemingly has been many tough budget years but going back for Dr. Molnar and Dr. Halfhill and I were projecting a long time ago that if we could get through these 4 years, we would mark this one on the calendar. Not that what's coming up isn't important, but we just felt a real need to try to get through this year. And if we had to go off cycle, that would be not a good time to do it, but maybe the least hurtful time to do it. So it's a year-long process. The really neat thing, a lot of school districts, the way they adopt curriculum in the traditional way is you pick a couple of representatives and you bring them out of their classroom and they get together, they look at materials and they pick materials, and all those teachers out in the classroom that will be using those materials had nothing to do with the process. And the way we do it is much messier, much more complicated, but every teacher that teaches science in this district at the elementary level, that's just about every teacher, and certainly at the secondary level, all of our science teachers are equally involved in the process the whole way through. So that obviously generates a lot of discussion, a lot of opportunities to agree, a lot of opportunities to not agree. And over the course of the year, what we recommend isn't what every teacher in this district wants, but we try to reach a consensus. In our definition, what we consider to be a consensus isn't majority rules. It's a consensus for us is that we studied it all year long. Everybody was involved. Everyone had an opportunity to be heard. And when that process was all over, the will of the group was evident. Everybody knows what we wanted, the direction that we wanted to go. Having said that, what we're proposing is pretty much on, science can tend to be more expensive with all the manipulatives, but we're in line with what's budgeted and what we spent in years past for other curricular adoptions. We're looking right at the $200,000 figure for K-12 science. And what I've asked is for principals to briefly discuss what they're adopting and why it fits their needs best. And we'll start at the beginning with Mr. Clara with K-1.
Good evening. I'll be speaking on behalf of the teachers who are in the building. We did go through an extensive process this year. It should be noted that there are not as many school textbook companies as there used to be in years past. There are much smaller and much larger groups working collaboratively together. So we look at 3 different types of books and sets. One of the things that my teachers talked to me about was they wanted materials that were a natural fit with the curriculum, math, and reading they were currently doing, things that could support that. And I understood what they meant by that. I thought that was important too. There are points in the stories that we read or in the math that we do that are really great places for us to talk about science, do things that are exploratory. And so they were looking for a very specific thing to support that. Kits that would allow our kids to be exploratory, to be inquiry-based. And that was what they wanted from their time as they examined things. What I thought was interesting too is that some of the groups really wanted to talk more about doing things in a hands-on way because our kids, this is their first opportunity to explore in science. And so we didn't want to overwhelm them with a lot of things that might seem to be theoretical. We wanted to do practical things with our kids.
Mr. Clara, if I may interrupt.
Yes.
I appreciate how much you're trying to involve the audience. But
Yes, sorry.
would you please step up and address the board?
Absolutely, my apologies.
Thank you.
I can be loud, so. Anyway, what I wanted to say in short, now that I've kind of covered so much of it from the wrong side, is that our teachers spent a lot of time thinking about what was best for our kids. They looked at what we do in math and in reading in particular, found natural fits, natural places where we could work our science curriculum in to support those things in an interdisciplinary way. That's a more meaningful, more respectful, and more likely way for kids to remember what they've done. And they chose kits that will support that throughout the course of the year. They are pretty neat activities. And they were very clear with me that they didn't want to buy things they didn't feel they were going to use. They wanted these particular items in this kit as supports for what they do in the ordinary operations of their teaching in the school day. And I really respected their efforts in trying to identify what those were and where they fit. Questions for me? Yes.
Dan, what's wrong with the one we have now?
What's wrong with the?
With the curriculum you have now?
There's nothing wrong with the curriculum we have now.
Why are we getting a new one?
Oh, well, it's part of our cycle. We renew things, and things change over time. Over that course of time, you have new things that are discovered or new approaches. The kits that we're looking at actually support the things that we want to show, get hands-on activities with kids, whereas perhaps in the past that wasn't the case. That wasn't always the philosophy in science. And so we're doing something different.
Is this one technology intensive?
There are technology components, not as much of the technology at my level. Again, it's more hands-on experiential. But yes, there are technology components too.
How does that fit into the ongoing program? Does equipment have to be replaced?
Well, there are some replenishment items, but they're not significant things.
They're not?
No.
Supplies more than equipment.
And we try to be very, again, I think it's kind of old school that you consider your textbook to be your curriculum. There's nothing wrong with our curriculum. Our teachers update our curriculum in a cyclical process throughout the school year and every year. So our teachers are very focused on what the curriculum is. Now they need to choose materials that best support the curriculum.
Yes, sir.
And again, we haven't had an opportunity to do that in 11 years. And you know, Mr. Clara spoke about really wanting to focus on what his teachers actually wanted to use. And just to support that, I do know in meeting with the reps that Mr. Clara, in going through that process, his overall quote for K1 was cut in half. Just by him going back as part of the process and making sure that they were really tight on exactly what they needed. So when the quote came out, here's a K1 program, it wasn't, okay, let's take it. He took that, went back, pared it down, and came in at half the cost of the original quote.
Our teachers really talked about wanting specific things and not wanting things they would not use. And I respected that. I understood that. In our meetings, they talked at length about having things that they may not get to. They wanted the things they knew they would get to. And so we were very selective in our process about what we were going to buy, not just buying the whole package, just the items we felt best fit our curriculum. And I have to tip my hat to my teachers. I think they did a great job with it.
Overall, Dan, is the new curriculum different significantly from what you've been doing?
It is, because our state standards have been adopted in the time since then, and we are focused on how we're being measured, which is that test. And so we look at what is being asked of us at those levels to get kids ready for fourth grade, our first testing window, and we want materials that support those great scores we have in fourth grade. So we're very well aware of that articulation between K to 4, what we have to teach, how we can get kids interested in science, what that will take. And one of the things that they talked to me about as a secondary guy for many years, I didn't necessarily understand it, but I do now. Our kids at this level are experiential learners. They need to put their hands on things and try things. And that is really a neat component of the science at our level. When you get to high school, then it's time to maybe talk about theory. But for us, we want kids to be excited about science, to be involved in it, and find the natural fits in our reading and math to make that work.
The reason I ask is we're doing so well. That's why.
And we're cognizant of that. I think that's why the choices that they made were not to buy things just to buy them, but rather to say, here are the things that we know we need to show. Here are the ways that we can show it. Here are the activities that we can do to do that. And they were very specific with me about that. Again, I think they made it very easy for us. It was a pretty clear consensus. This is how we want kids to learn science. We know that it works.
My concern is not the integration of technology. It's becoming technology dependent to the point that you can't do the curriculum unless you have certain things. And
I
that's a
certainly get
concern,
that.
you know.
This package that we're looking at for us is more of replenishment of
I would think
materials.
this level, yeah. Thank you.
Anything else for me?
Who is the publisher? What is
Oh.
the name of the publisher? Maybe you said.
McMillan McGraw-Hill. I should
Is
have
it
said
McGraw Hill? Okay.
I apologize. I should have said that at the
Yeah,
outset.
who was the earlier text, the one that we're leaving now? Is that also McGraw Hill, or did we change both?
I'm not sure with that
Okay.
group. I couldn't tell you that.
She knows. She knows.
Lindsay DeCasolo is our science team leader at the high school.
What is it?
Holt.
Oh, okay, very good. I'm an old publisher here, so I'm kind of curious of the capacity.
We can certainly have that information for you next
Sure.
week.
That's fine. I was just curious about the.
Yes, Ms.
I
Scott.
was just curious, the other, like when we did the other curriculum last year, they had CDs, everybody got a CD. Is this the same thing? You have the CDs they get to take
They have
home?
that technology.
They can go online and look.
They have that here in our package we're looking at. We're looking at more kit-based activities, so we may not be using as much of that component as some of the other grades may. Ours
For
will be more,
elementary.
right, ours will be more hands-on, and we may not be using as much of that. We wanted to focus more on having kids do things in an exploratory manner. There will be some technology that will be included, but I don't think that will be the basis of our curriculum. We're going to use the hands-on manipulatives and those types of activities for our young kids. Thanks.
Mr. Claire.
Mr. Lee?
Dan pretty much answered a lot of the things I had on my sheet here, but I'll reiterate some of it. We also chose grades 2 through 5, the McMillan-McGraw-Hill series. There's a sample 4th grade kid right on the other side of what Dan was showing. Some of the components of that, and this kind of answers some of the questions about the technology. The student edition textbooks, there are leveled readers, what's called a leveled reader library, which are smaller books with different topics that the teachers use within the classroom to spend more time on different topics. There's things called an activity flip chart. A lot of technology, similar, we didn't have a lot of that in what we've had it for 11 years, and a lot of the science and all the other subjects are coming out with a lot more technology things, and we have, within our classrooms, we have a lot of technology, our Elmo carts that the teachers use on a daily basis for reading and math. They have science activity DVDs, what's called an exam view CD, which is a test generator, student work CD-ROM, where the kids can be interactive with the technology within the textbook. There are also different kits, equipment kits. The upper grades chose what they call the deluxe kit, which has more equipment in it that the kids all can be involved in doing hands-on activities. At the second grade level, they chose the what's called a grab and go kit, where the teacher can use, there's enough for the teacher to demonstrate for the kids to see what they're doing. There's several major themes in each grade level that coincide with the state standards, and it really comes through in all the books in grades 2 through 5. Life science, which includes topics on living things and ecosystems. Earth and space science, which includes the earth, resources, and weather and space. And physical science, which includes matter along with motion, forces, and energy. And within each of these grade level, the topics are similar, but they are more complex as you go from grade 2 up through grade 5. All of the topics match the Pennsylvania State Science Standards. And again, as Dan said, we want to be able to give our kids a well-rounded view of science through the use of the textbook, the technology pieces, and the kits where the students and the teachers can conduct different types of science experiments. And Dr. Scott had mentioned, and I was almost ready to scratch out number 7, but it's important to repeat again. Our 4th grade year is the first time that our PSSA is given the science test, and our 4th grade classes have performed extremely well over the last several years. Again, we had 100% of our students who were proficient and advanced on the 4th grade science PSSA and ranked first in both Westmoreland and Fayette. We want to continue to reach that level because, as I always tell the teachers, it's not, science PSSA, that's not just a 4th grade issue, that's a K through 4 issue and then on up the line, same as all the other subjects. So we wanted to strive and work with the grades together so that they can assist making sure that the students, when they get to 4th grade, can continue to score as well as they have been. Again, as I said, there's a sample kit down here if you care to look at that after the meeting.
Yeah, just to add to what these two folks have said, we've heard a lot about PSSA and scores, and that's obviously our yardstick. But our goal is to have kids who are literate in science and mathematics, and there's a big push now, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, so that our kids are not only doing well on the test, because that makes us look good as a district, but we want these kids to be able to compete globally when it's time to enter college, when it's time to be in the workforce. So we want to support that in any way we can, and obviously an updated curriculum and updated materials to support our curriculum would support that endeavor.
Right, immersing the kids in learning all this, especially, kindergarten through first grade, then through the elementary, and I'm sure Mr. Masha, Mr. Kropchak will be sharing the upper grades and how more complex it gets.
Any questions for Mr. Lee? Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mashel will talk about grades 6, 7, and 8 at the middle school.
Mr. Mash, we're dying to know what you're going to do here.
And he is a
I'm
former
going to
science
take a little bit of a different approach here. You have some materials in front of you. I'm going to be talking about an inquiry-based learning system for science. You should have a cup, and as it's set up right now, that is the problem. You should have a cup with a gummy bear lifesaver underneath it, a gummy worm on top, and you should have a piece of paper that should look like this. Okay, and this is a very, very simplified model, and not to say that I wanted to make things less complex for you, but basically this underlying principle is the scientific method, which is the key concept in science for discovery. It's how we address problems, look at problems, identify the problem, and then find solutions to solve the problems. It's a basic concept in science. Your task, and I'm just going to present it and just give you a brief second to look at it. Your task is to get that lifesaver out from underneath the cup, wrap it around the worm, using only the paper clips that were given to you. The worm cannot touch the table, and you cannot touch anything other than the paper clips with your hands. Just give you a second to maybe look at that, think about it, and then I'm going to explain why I've asked you to do that. So you can talk with a partner, you can look at it, you can see how you might approach a solution to that.
Tell me what
This is learning by inquiry, by discovery.
You're not allowed to touch it.
We're supposed to get the,
You cannot touch anything.
yeah, but the paper clips we can.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to work collaboratively?
You are allowed to work collaboratively.
Oh, there you go. Wrap it around mine, here.
Can't do that, Butch. You're injuring the reactions.
You cannot use your hands.
No, we're not.
Everyone's smacking.
Now we'll hold it down. Now wrap it around. But just right around.
That has to be through it, doesn't it?
Through it
It has to be through it.
You can't injure Fred. We're not
You
letting
cannot
him
injure
do
Fred.
it.
You cannot injure Fred.
Good job.
Wait,
Yeah, exactly.
Make a tripod out of it. Now go with the other
Okay, now I'm gonna put them in.
They stuck one in the Fred.
How far? You want us to wrap it around the lifesaver?
Yes, it's a lifesaver around the worm, just like that.
That worm's dead.
We didn't stab or anything, we saved it.
We saved its life. We went below the
Okay. I'll leave that with you so that maybe later on you could work on that again.
Put that paper clip through that one.
Okay.
We're gonna go fishing later on.
As a good teacher, I now have to ask you to please place all materials aside so that we can. Okay, the intent was that the middle school is looking to take a different approach as far as how we want to address science in our school. We are looking at a program called, the acronym is CPUP. It is the Science Education for Public Understanding Program. It is a program that has been developed by the University of Berkeley at California, and it has been in existence for over 20 years. Basically, if you look, I've also provided you another sheet with some key points that I've identified. A lot of times in science, in particular, rote memory becomes an important part of science. If you just look back at your own science experiences, you know, in science class, biology class, you had to memorize bones and parts of flowers and things like that. Okay, this program here basically is the ultimate goal is inquiry-based lessons that support student learning. Students are given key underlying concepts. They're introduced the key underlying concepts, and then they are allowed to do hands-on experiments with hopefully being able to identify what the concepts are. And then, of course, afterwards, the teacher refreshes and reinforces everything with the class. If you just look at the little experiment that you did, what was in looking at the scientific method is identifying the problem, formulating a hypothesis as to how to solve the problem, develop a set of steps, procedures that you are going to perform to do the problem, analyze the data that you receive, and then come to some conclusion and reevaluate whether or not you need to perform the experiment again. What was the problem? You had to put the lifesaver around the worm. That was the problem. You identified ways to approach it, which is your hypothesis. Let's use and I was watching one group in particular, let's open the paper clips, let's try to stretch the gummy bear lifesaver and then insert the worm in between it. So then you formulated a hypothesis, you performed the steps. Was it successful? Yes, it was. Did you have to go back and reinvent or reevaluate the way to approach the solution? No. In some cases, some of us might have had to do that. That's inquiry-based science. That's learning by discovery, doing the actual practical application.
Could I interrupt and just ask how our administrative team did on that?
We're reevaluating our data, so.
You can't say that Fred's still with us. That's positive.
We wanted to save Fred, and hopefully we did. I just want to point out a couple key points on the sheet that I had given you. Okay, the intent of inquiry-based learning is to relate the science to students' prior knowledge, thus forming strong learning connections. It has been proven that a student learns better if you can connect it back to something that they have in prior experience. CPUP, which is an acronym for this program, allows that to happen because kids are actually doing. When I was taking earning my BS in college, a lot of times we were given the underlying concepts in the class. We went to the lab where we developed the actual concepts through the actual practical application of what we were instructed in the classroom setting, and then had to actually go down in the lab and do it. By doing this, we're hoping that at the middle school level, we are better preparing kids for the underlying concepts, being able to perform the concepts to better introduce them into the high school setting. Inquiry-based learning assists students to learn the content rather than memorize the material, thus enabling them to retain the content better and longer. Students gain a sense of efficacy, effectiveness, and usefulness when they gain the ability to produce the desired results through inquiry. Engaged and sustained learning are prerequisites for understanding and requires that students see the value of their work and feel a growing sense of efficacy. And finally, a key goal of learning is fluid and flexible transfer, successful use of one's knowledge and skills in situations of importance. That is, being able to transpose that knowledge into similar situations, either at that level or at the next higher level at the high school level. So we are, at the middle school, we feel we have an obligation to provide our students with the skills to be able to go and address what is going to be taken at the high school level. Yes, Dr.
The third item on that page, 6, 7, and 8, is that different than what we're doing now? Then the sixth grade is presently Earth and Space, and then 7 is Life? Or
That
is
is
this
the
different?
current model that we follow right
That's
now.
what I thought.
Yes.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yes. A good part about this program is that It is hands-on. A lot of it allows the students the ability to be able to actually perform the experiments, gain an understanding through the practical application of it. There is some lab, obviously it's going to be a little different than the actual traditional classroom setting because it is so hands-on. There's a lot of materials being used, but if you look at it overall, it really, a lot of it is expendable, replenishable materials. Very simple. I went to Walmart this afternoon and picked up the materials for your experiment today at $6.24.
So will the teachers be responsible, they'll get their own supplies, or, I mean, that comes out of the
That
department
comes
budget?
with the
They
kids.
don't have, the teachers don't have to pay for that
No,
themselves?
no, I just did that because
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to prove a point this evening.
Mr. Massey, could you talk a little bit about your middle school process? Because it was a little bit different than just, it was
Yes.
more involved in having reps come in. You actually put a different work into the exploration of CPOP.
Yeah, we, as Dr. said, we did have reps come in, we did talk to reps, but we were very fortunate that Greensburg-Salem's middle school in Greensburg has instituted this program for a number of years. They have shown some good success through their PSSA results. Over the last couple years, they have increased their PSSA scores approximately 20 points, which is a fairly good increase. I contacted the Greensburg-Salem Middle School principal. He allowed us the opportunity. I took my science department to Greensburg-Salem, and we spent a good part of the day there observing classroom procedures. We actually were able to talk to the classroom teachers. We talked to the principal himself, and we were able to gain some insight from actual visitation. So the information that we took from our visitations, we came back and we meticulously sat down and we were double advocates. We looked at the pros and cons of everything, and when the dust settled, this was the program that my science teachers felt would be the best example for us to use in our school. So we did go, yes, we did kind of diverge off of the traditional have the textbook recommend. We actually went and experienced it in the schools that it was being applied in.
And Mr. Massey, there is a textbook that goes along with the
Yes,
program as well?
I do have textbooks. One thing about the textbook, unlike some of the other programs, this program only accounts for us being able to buy a classroom set. Now, this is going to probably go against the conventional model where everybody is given a textbook. The purpose and intent behind this model is that all work is done in the classroom, through the discovery process in the classroom. There are a lot of resources, packets. There is a teacher packet that is also provided with this program. Students are asked to do analysis of what they have done in class that day, so that material is what they might be working on at home versus taking the conventional textbook home and reading chapter 7 and doing questions 4 through 5. They're actually going to go home and take knowledge to the higher level. They're going to synthesize the information. They're going to actually be asked to analyze what has been learned in class that day. So it is a little bit of a different process, and because of the fact that not so many textbooks are needed, the cost is obviously, relative to that. Now, and Dr. Scott will talk about costs some other time.
Other questions for Mr. Massey?
I'm sorry it took so much time.
It's all right.
Mr. Krofcheck and Mrs. DeCastelo?
Mrs. Lindsay DeCastelo is here. At the high school level, we are departmentalized, and we do have a science department team leader, and they have worked. They've been a very effective, a high-functioning team that have worked very thoroughly to kind of go through and vet all of the materials available for the curriculum. And I have worked closely with the department in my last year, almost 2 years as the principal, with the commitment to see drastic improvement. And we have already, within the first year, saw a large increase at the high school level. And Lindsay, Ms. DeCaslo will share with you the process at the high school level that led them to this place where we're at now. So.
And Lindsay is a very talented team leader. Unfortunately, tonight you may not get much of a sense of that because she, in addition to her appearing, she also brought her laryngitis with her.
Yes, I apologize for my voice. Can you hear me? Okay, all right. The high school team, we are a fantastic group. We work very well together, but we are also a very systematic group. And when we were presented with a huge amount of information on textbooks, ancillary products, technology products, we developed what we thought we needed to do two things: figure out what system was going to work for the best for us now and take us into the future, knowing that it's been 11 years since our last adoption. We really wanted to make sure we were choosing the best overall system for, again, now and the future. And then we had to look at all the materials and determine what was going to be that best system, what had the best characteristics. So in our data analysis, we actually developed a paper evaluation of each one of the systems that we had, and it allowed us to get a numerical value for each of the textbooks, saying, wow, this one has some really great characteristics here. This one's website is fantastic. Does that outweigh maybe what the actual text version of this one is? So we really spent a lot of teaming time evaluating each system. What we found is that Glencoe provided the best system for our current curriculum that we have in place, but it also was very adaptable to changing state standards, changing state high school level tests, going from PSSAs to Keystones, and also going from maybe state standards to Common Core. It was a system that could provide all of those things. It has excellent technology, not requirements, but ancillaries, most of which are web-based, which would not incur a cost on our part, but our students would be able to access videos, online labs, PowerPoint presentations, all supplied by the company and available for student use. It also provided an excellent updated text. Our current science text, being 11 years old, has some inaccurate information. Some of it is unable to be used at this point because information is changing. So it definitely provided the best information for us. It also has moved, it does two things that we were trying to solve on our own, one of which is the reading level. We really want our students to increase their ability to read nonfiction text, and this product allows them, the actual textbook version is a higher reading level than what we currently have, but they also provide a lower reading level for our learners that are struggling, and that was huge when we were evaluating the system. We want to take our lower level learners, get them a little more confident, and then push them to a higher level. And this gives us the opportunity to do that. It gets them better prepared. College is all about reading. You have to read your textbook in college. And so if we can do that for those kids, that'll be a huge problem solved for us. Another key point is that instead of the system we currently have has some guided reading that are basically just checking for reading instead of understanding. Did you go through this process? Did you read? Can you fill in the blanks? The system that we're choosing with Glencoe actually It checks for analysis. It makes them, checks for understanding of the reading. It makes them deduce from the reading. It really makes them think, as opposed to simply just follow the words, fill in the blanks. And that's another problem that we have been, as a department, trying to solve on our own. And this system will allow us to do that. Another note, again, the website that is provided by the system is a very fluid website. They're constantly updating, they're constantly changing, and that was a real sticking point for us, knowing that they could move to the future, and we could move with them into the future. So, any other questions?
A point of clarification, that Glencoe is the secondary division of McMillan-McGraw-Hill.
We did, at the AP level, we did choose a few other publishers, and that was really closely evaluated. We felt that those publishers had the best book available. For example, the Campbell book is a biology book. It's by a Pearson publisher. When I was at Penn State, they used an earlier version of that book. I know Pitt uses that book also, and we just really feel like that is the keystone for college biology, and it's what we want to use as an AP textbook to prepare our students. I remember sitting in my 8 o'clock biology course, very first course in college, and the kid next to me said, "Hey, we used this book in high school." And I thought, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And they already knew what was coming, and they were very well prepared coming from high school. And again, it was an earlier version of that textbook. Penn State's still using it, Pitt is using it.
And that's in part of looking at local colleges, and having an understanding where a lot of our students go. At the high school level, we sort of are divided into the core science and what would be kind of the advanced placement science. And you have to look, and if you send in a good core of your students to California or IUP or Penn State or Pitt, it is very good transition to know that they spent a year with Campbell biology and they're taking biology freshman year. They're already familiar with the text. They have an understanding of it. So that in part was one thing that we looked at in selecting those textbooks at the advanced placement and upper level elective courses.
Maybe that answers it. With courses like chemistry, physics, and some of this, those would be with this same publisher in your... No, those are the same.
Those are with Holt.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that is based on, we wanted specifically as a department, Campbell's biology or chemistry
Zoomed on.
chemistry. So we went specifically looking for those, knowing that that is what most of our kids that would take chem and bio in college would probably see again.
Other questions or comments for our high school folks? Thank you. I hope your throat is feeling better.
Just one thing I'd like to say. I'm very proud to see what's going on here. There's one word which we developed, we've seen it here, is teamwork. And these programs, there's a lot of teamwork going on with everybody from the top to the bottom. It's very proud to see this happening in our school. Very proud.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. All right, we'll move on. The next item I have for you to vote on at the voting meeting will be the list of prospective graduates. We will word the motion in such a fashion that these are the people that are recommended for graduation, pending their completion of the appropriate number of credits and all graduation requirements. The next item I have for you is an agreement with Presley Ridge. We have a student who it was necessary to have go to school at Presley Ridge Day School in Greensburg. And every time we have a student there, there's a new contract for that particular student. So you can take a look at that. If you have questions regarding this particular situation, we will not answer those here, but Mr. Clara can discuss those with you in executive session due to student confidentiality. The next item on your agenda, actually the next two items, Mrs. Tarzan was on vacation last week, and this is why they don't let me do the agendas, because I put the same item under two separate items. But it's the Westmoreland County Student Assistance of the SAP program. And all this is an articulation agreement between Westmoreland County Student Assistance and the Southmoreland School District, agreeing that we will participate in that program. We've been participating in with Westmoreland County for their student assistance program since student assistance came into being many years ago. So we would ask that we renew this as we do on an annual basis. The next item that we need, and this is just a discussion item, it does not require voting at this point in time. There's an executive summary that was prepared by Dr. Kerr, who is the chairman of the Education Advisory Group, Superintendent's Group for Central Westmoreland Career and Technology Center. The Career and Technology Center is beginning to show its age in many ways. So a feasibility study was begun with HHSDR Architects and Engineers talking about a full-scale renovation and addition project. That was then somewhat scaled back, and we heard a presentation by the Chevron Energy Solutions Company, and they are prepared to provide a proposal where they can do some upgrading, and some of that money can be recouped through energy savings through Act 57, 77, and 39. So we did authorize at the Professional Advisory Council level a request for a proposal to explore that. We wanted to take a very conservative approach. All of us are superintendents of our various districts, and we're all aware of our current budget situations, and we're trying to do the things we need to do at CWCTC with a minimal impact on anyone's budget. So as much as these dollars can be recouped through energy savings, that's obviously how we would like to do it. Just to highlight, we have boilers in that facility that are 37 years old. We're very concerned about their ability to continue to heat the building. Parts are no longer available for those boilers. Some of the shop areas, the ventilation is sorely lacking, and there are leaking roofs throughout the facility. So we need to be looking at that infrastructure. So that's just an executive summary there for you, and I will certainly bring you more details as they become available to me. Any questions? Citizens' comments? Well, we have one more item that I need to talk about, which is not on your agenda. It just came up today. There was a document in your packet about the PSBA Platform Committee. As Mr. Miller is our delegate to the Platform Committee, and these are new and improved package that Mr. Tarzan passed out to you this evening. Mr. Miller had a proposed plank for the PSBA platform. So Levi, if you'd like to discuss that a little bit.
Sure, I can just, it's this memo here. We passed a motion last year, and it was in support of a bill that was being considered in the legislature. The platform committee discussed this last year, and this was in August. Now they're asking for resolutions or support of resolutions. I thought it was worthy then, but it needs to be in a form, not in support of a specific bill, but of a general proposal, and it has to do with work stoppage and strikes being a part of the collective bargaining process. And the proposal here is that the PSBA support legislation is just kind of a general statement, which removes work stoppage and strikes as bargaining tactics in the collective bargaining process. This is not a local issue, and I certainly am not, as we earlier discussed it, put it in that context. But and then in terms of comments, I think that the work stoppage or teacher strikes are negative to public education and unfairly penalizing students for difficulties in the negotiating process. We have had more strikes were high in terms of the national, I'm not sure if we're the top right now, but we're among the top 3 in school strikes as states. You can see the notes there. So I think I'm just putting it here for discussion. I would like to see us vote on it if you're open to it next week in regards to, or if you have any comments or questions on it in regards to, yeah.
Any questions?
Sure.
Yeah, Levi, I read your letter, and obviously I support this, but I don't see any words. I mean, how are you going to phrase this? What are you going to ask for? Because the present bill does a whole lot of things, which means a day lost. It doesn't. If you strike, a day lost is a day lost. You don't get paid for it. There's no retroactive pay. You don't extend the school year. Or is it that they can never strike? Or what words would you want us to back in terms of a law about this?
Okay. Currently, just to put it in this, all of the proposals that the platform committee adopts are kind of 1 or 2 sentence proposals. For example, let's take the one on in regards to open bidding on what is the technical name for it on building projects. Can't think of the prevailing wage. Okay, that is the platform committee for PSBA adopts that we support prevailing wage legislation. Okay, then that needs to be interpreted to specific bills. There might be 2 or 3 bills floating through or various people proposing. At the present time, there's a general kind of proposal that PSBA supports, and that is to penalize strikes in terms of making to pay penalize in the sense that when teachers go out on strike, they do not get paid, and in fact, there's a penalty on that. So that is this goes one step beyond that, and it's just a general statement that we support legislation. This goes one step, I suppose, beyond that, and says that we would not see the strike in itself being a part of the
no strike.
To put it crassly, they've become illegal, and that is really a good. I forget. I think about 2/3 of the states have that. New York, for example. So that is what is being proposed here, and that's why you have it in a one sentence form, not in regards to a specific legislation, but in regards to simply being part of.
This one would stop it completely, wouldn't it, Levi?
Well, for all practical purposes, that's the.
Because the other one is considered a little bit softer. You know, you can still strike, but you just lose your money.
That's right.
But this would stop it altogether.
Well, I don't know.
This is what we would support.
This is what we would support.
Those are the words. Okay.
Any more questions or comments?
Is there consensus to place that item on the agenda as well?
Citizens' comments?
Good evening. Just a few comments on the presentation by the county people. And it's sort of, again, a broad perspective like I usually think. This sort of takes me back to the days of the Walmart things. I sat in the auditorium as a 22-year-old person when we were going through that, and everyone was really upbeat on bringing Walmart into the community. And, you know, I see that happening in a way here again. You know, the Keystone Opportunity Zone is a stimulus program. It's sort of a trickle-down economic theory. And I favor the government getting involved in helping small businesses and in the school doing the things that they could do to help that. But we don't really know what these businesses are that we're going to be helping out here. We don't really have control. But basically, what's going to happen is I feel that we're going to get the big players that want to build a $20 million building. Obviously, you're going to be a big player. And I don't think that we should be subsidizing these large corporations who have the lobbyists, who know how to play the game, know how to use the American Legislative Exchange Council to set these conservative programs up to give these these businesses a start. You know, every time someone says jobs to a county board or to a school board, everyone just stops thinking there. You got to think, you know, what are these jobs, and what are the details of the jobs? You know, and again, I really don't think we need to increase the corporate profits for Sony or for Volkswagen, for Walmart or Aquion. You know, when he says Aquion, then he says energy, but they never say it's Marcellus Shell. That's just a personal opinion there, and I'm not sure that it's Marcellus, but usually when they say energy, they don't want to use Marcellus, and I think that just shows their intentions. But and he doesn't want to look back at the details of what we've been asked to do for Walmart's an example, but in this place particularly. But I do. I'd like to know how much money our government has put into that. And, you know, there's multiple layers. You know, this battery company that's coming in now is looking, you know, at this aspect, but they're getting, you know, other perks and government grants and green grants. So, you know, it'd be really hard to get a true number of how much money we put into that place up there and how many jobs and how much money we got out of it. And I think if you look at it, like a lot of these TARP programs now, you know, they'll put out millions and millions of dollars. They'll get 50 jobs or something. And, you know, we just have to be more critical. And the other thing about my last point then, with the RIDC, you know, he said that, you know, they don't take taxpayer money, but I'm not sure where the money comes from. If we're subsidizing a corporation feeds RIDC, then I think that's our money. I don't think they're going out and raising money with bake sales to get rich. And, you know, they've got I've seen their complex in Pittsburgh. You know, it's just, you know, it's a pretty big operation. And, the fact that they could be in line to purchase this property someday is really the dark side of this, because anytime you see a public asset get thrown into an RIDC who doesn't, you know, a nonprofit, and then RIDC buys it, I think that's a horrible precedent to go. And I think historically we'll look back at what happened here tonight, just as we can look back at Walmart. You know, some people love Walmart, I understand that. But we certainly didn't have this conversation when Walmart came in to the, well, you know, it might have been there, but it certainly wasn't the consent or the awareness in the community of what we were actually doing, bringing Walmart into the community and, you know, America losing their jobs. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more citizens' comments? Need a motion to adjourn?
Mike, can I ask a question, please? I don't get around the school district as much as some people. Lee, is this the building that we've been getting complained about, that we got the complaints about, and it's getting fixed? Is that what this is?
Yes,
That's something
Is that the one, Jack, that we've been getting complaints about? It looks nice. He's fixing it up.
Is it Lee's report?
Yeah, it's Lee's report.
Go ahead, Lee, I'll let you respond.
Yes, we're also going to paint door frames, and get some more design. And, we still have to repair the roof.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, because we've been hearing about this for a long time, and I'm really happy that you were able to do this, Lee. Thank you.
And again, one of the things that we're looking at down the road is when we're not using as much of that building for storage.
Yeah, you said to take some of
we
it,
may be
yeah.
able to, you know, you can do a little bit more. But yes, to answer your question, I was having trouble focusing on what picture you had there. But yes.
He's been complaining, you know, and
Right.
I'm glad that we did that, Jack, because he,
You're gonna do anything with the restroom? You're gonna update the restrooms with this?
We did somewhat with what we could do. And again, if and when space becomes available, we're going to look at that.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put the onus just on the coaches. Go up there and look at it.
Yeah.
If you look at the rest of our buildings, and they're good. Our track, tennis, baseball, And the people who use up there, that building really does need some attention.
why I was
It needs-
happy to
and
see
I-
this.
I
I
commend you
agree.
this, but I think we should really push at it in the next year, because it's sort of and the facilities are used a lot up there, so.
I'm
Good.
just glad to see something was happening.
We want to do
like
more.
that. Thank you, Lee.
On the stadium pipe project, we did put together the bid book, and it was advertised, and we utilized a service called APRIL12 to make it available online electronically, so that potential bidders had a choice. They could, if they wish, obtain access to the electronic site and download it, or they could go to one of several different locations and purchase the book. And the advantage that this had was that it made it, after we overcame the difficulties of getting my software to fit with the engineer's software for the different Word packages, to have it all available and easily disseminated, so that we weren't dependent upon, if someone would call into the school at 4 minutes at 4:30 or 5 o'clock and nobody would be there, they wouldn't be able to get access or order the book. Whereas by going online, you could get easier access to it. We had a pre-bid meeting. Mr. Miswa and I attended, and I think it was 4 or 5 construction companies appeared and toured and asked some questions. We will have the bids due on April 26th. And the idea would be, and I can't remember when the May meetings are. Are they the 3rd or the 10th?
Right, what we will do is we will ask to post the first May meeting as a voting meeting, so that we can talk about awarding that bid and get that underway as soon as
We
possible.
actually would want it awarded that night. And the reason for that is that we need to have it awarded before the time period would run out on the prevailing wage report that we got back in January. Those are only good for a certain number of days. And then you have to reapply and start the process all over again. The contractor will have the option of starting their project within 6 days of the award letter, projected to being May 9th. So it'd be no earlier than May 14th and no later than June 4th. We sort of gave them a window there of when to start, with the idea being if there was a forecast for a lot of rainy weather and they wanted to wait a week or two, give them that choice. But the project needs to be completed by July 13th, so that you have the relative expectation of being able to access the field for the end of July by some of the different groups that are involved with fall activities. I just hope that we have a relatively dry June or at least July so that it can get done. So I just wanted to give you that update because we hadn't talked about that for a long time, and finally it's getting off the ground and moving along.
Thank you, David, for bringing that up. So I was also at that meeting. I should have had it on tonight's agenda. I did not. One of the things that took so long was drawing the specifications. We used the same engineers that was used when the turf was originally installed. And Mr. Beliknak, the engineer, was very careful about specifying, as was Mr. Patonic, where vehicles could go in terms of making sure that the integrity of the drainage system of the field as well as the turf was well protected.
that was part of the holdup there, but hopefully, by the middle of July, this project will be, finished.
What we're doing is that we're going to have the Progress people be responsible for giving quotes for the cost of rolling back the artificial turf along the sidelines away from the grandstands and towards the field, so that we minimize the possibilities of them having to take equipment over the turf, and also to stay away from the underground drainage system for the field. So each contractor will be obtaining a projected subcontract bid from Progress. Progress could also, if they want, submit their own bid for the overall project. The really big problem for this is that we don't know the precise location of the stream in relation to the fixed objects, because when the snaking was done, it couldn't go the whole way through because of the deterioration and the collapsing of the pipe. But it appears to be in close proximity and probably going underneath the grandstands. So one of the larger expenses involved with this is that the contractor is going to have the responsibility as part of their base bid for figuring out how to either work underneath the grandstands, if that is feasible, or in effect to move it or disassemble it and reassemble it. And that's all part of their base bid. So it's up to them to figure out the most efficacious way of doing that as part of their bid that you would then be voting upon in early May.
When you say the grandstand, are you talking about right out from the fieldhouse grandstand?
No,
The one they got for the band?
Right. The opposite side, where the
So they'll
visiting,
get trouble all the way over there.
the visiting team.
Okay.
Visiting team and our band.
All right, that's good.
Those two stand.
Any questions?
My only concern is, I think this is 14 months now this has been going on. It was last March or something that we were first notified. So we've got to get it done.
Yeah,
You know.
and now that we have specs,
Yeah.
we can move.
You know, we have a meeting on the 26th.
I can't hear you.
We have a meeting on the 26th, but that's too soon for you, huh?
Well, we'll be opening them that day.
Mhm.
So you have to allow a
Yeah.
little bit of time for doing some investigation and
Just didn't know how much of a hurry you were in.
Sometimes haste makes waste. Well, we'll give it another week to just make sure that we have, everything in the proper order.
Any more comments or questions from any board members?
I just want to document what everybody thinks about being here in the middle school. I mean, I know I'm having seem like I'm moving around a place because I'm having a hard time hearing and seeing, and I didn't know if we were going to stay here or if we entertain the motion of all going back to the administration building. And I know how much time and effort Paul puts into extra he's putting into all this, and I just didn't know what everybody else's thoughts were.
One of the things we have tonight, I'm not sure how well they're working at this juncture, but a comment was made that we were having trouble hearing each other. So there are a couple monitor speakers here that were designed to pick up conversations. I don't know if that has improved things for folks or not on the ends.
I've also heard from people out in the audience from TV land that they have trouble hearing and sometimes even seeing things, and
I just didn't know if anybody else had any thoughts on that.
we just want to throw it on the agenda and see how it goes next week for discussion, question.
One of the comments that I will make is looking at a long-range plan. Dr. Fike mentioned a week or so ago, and we're looking at a long-range plan. Some of the citizen comments, and I know Dr. Scott and I have had some discussions about the practical life expectancy of the building on Parker Avenue. Right now, the roof is fine. The bricks probably need to be repointed soon. The French drain system is not functioning well. There's a lot of moisture, and associated problems in the basement, and the parking lot is also a hazard. So if we're going to continue to use that building as an administration building and as a place where the board meets, then we're looking at probably putting some dollars into it with our student population becoming smaller and smaller. Dr. Scott and I actually talked about spending the next year looking at the feasibility of actually moving administrative operations out into one or more of the buildings, so that we're not putting money into that particular building and then turning that building into an asset either through liquidating it or renting it or whatever that decision will be made at a later date. But it is in need of some serious work if we're going to continue to live there for a long period of time.
Just didn't know what anybody else thought. I mean, it's hard to see each other when we're trying to, talk and.
Well, Jesse, there are other rooms we could look at. This can't be the only place. I mean, are there other rooms, libraries, stuff like
I
that?
just know all the extra hard work it takes on everybody's part to get it set up, get it torn down, whatever. That's what I wanted to talk about, that's all.
I think that's a good point to discuss.
This was supposed to be an experiment. Remember, we were just going to try it out.
Yeah.
We were. We basically said it was
Right.
just to try it out. So we're not locked into
I
it.
think our attendance has been down recently, as far as that's one of the reasons we moved up here. I also think the executive sessions are kind of hard when you're sitting looking each other's backs and things, instead of a more congenial method of having discussion back and forth with people.
Yeah, but Mike, you could sit down back there. You had to stand. You had to stand.
Well,
Do we want to put it on the
just fun to talk
agenda,
about.
or do you want to?
It's a little bit better now, but there for a while, everybody had to stand.
I like it here. It's fine.
Yeah, I hadn't given it much thought. I mean, I liked it there, I like it here. I don't know, but I hadn't, I don't have, I'm at this point, I'm kind of open to either one.
Put on the agenda, we'll see how it goes up or down, because
That's fine.
I have people, like, Gail talked to me about it also, but she's not able to make it tonight because of the funeral, so.
One of the things we can also do if you choose to stay here is we can look at a different arrangement for tables, and there are a number of things we can do.
We'll put that on the agenda for next week as well.
Anything else on the board? Need a motion to adjourn to executive session for personnel and possible litigation?
So moved.
Motion, we can second?
You can
Second.
say personnel and whatever.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I still like it here.
Adjourn.
Everybody said.
Just thank you to the administrators and to Lindsay for your hard work and your informative presentation.